And I have this ongoing performance project called .perf, where we program performances in different space situations. So in inside spaces, white cube, industrial spaces, but also lately in the last 2 years really in public spaces. And in public space we always try to commission new work which is really site specific, so it makes sense either for the environment, a political issue which is related to one space, or also like society moves in one space. We work with local artists, but we work also with international artists. It's more, not complicated, but more complex if you work, of course, with artists from abroad, because they need really some time when we talk about site-specific work on the site, actually, to really develop a project which makes sense, because we're not programming any spectacle on the street, which is, so we try to be very as close as possible, or asking questions with them. So for that performance platform we have in Geneva, we always commission new work, so we pay a new work they can develop, and ideally with artists from abroad, they spend some time in Geneva, as I already said. So as a curator, actually working in public space as well, it's quite interesting for me as well, because also I have to think about the space. I don't just have this white space to fill, but I can also like propose actually to introduce either poetic elements in public space, subversive elements, elements who bother maybe. So for me as a curator, it's quite interesting actually to work like this. It's, yeah. So I will show you 3 examples from our last edition we did in 2016 in public space. One is the first one I show you is an example of a local artist we programmed in the public space. Julie Sass, she did a performance where the whole process, getting an authorization to protest in the street as one person, was already, the whole process, was already being part of the process of the performance. So kind of all this hidden work. She did it herself. We didn't do it for her, because normally when we work in public space, as curators, of course, we ask authorization or not. It depends a little bit. Geneva is quite easy actually to do things in public space. The police is not really bothered by anything, which is, in this case, a good thing. So they never actually come. So we did organize a lot of things. Nothing. So Julie Sass, she got an authorization for performers actually to perform by themselves, to protest in the street, and it's written on the cardboard, no, nothing. So actually, it just means no, nothing. So the performers were just standing there, and they weren't supposed to talk to people, were interrogating the performer. So these are different spaces, sites she chose. So of course she chose, you will see that afterwards again, so she chose really also emblematic sites of Geneva, and also like the UN in Geneva, but also like sites which are in like areas where people live, which are very popular, where people go out. So it's like this different mix of sites the performers were standing in to protest. So the performers, as I said, they weren't supposed to talk to the people asking them questions, so it created quite strange situations where they say, why do you just stand here and say nothing? Or say nothing, or say there is nothing. As she was a local artist, she could really like play with this whole, I get an authorization for this protest or for this performance. So she was really getting. Then we worked with an international trio called Cactus. It's an artist from Palestine, Noura Baker, an artist from Brazil, Thais Menetris, and a Greek artist. They're working as a collective. So they didn't really have been to Geneva before. So as a curator, we try to look as much as for possible ideal places, sites for them, which I would now not do anymore because it created the distance was too big for what they wanted to do and what exactly was possible. So we suggested them locations. So actually they played with the format of the street musician. So they were sitting in the street and people could activate the performance. They were just sitting there until they were activated by these objects in the suitcase. So the people passing by them, they were invited actually to use some small instruments to activate them, which did not work at all in Geneva because I underestimated also these non-reactions because people are more like afraid of like these kind of street musicians. They always think they're going to steal their money, and I didn't really actually think about that really. So this activation, we often had to do it as curators on the side so people would know that nothing is going to happen badly. So they want to kill them. This is a really touristic side of Geneva, of this big fountain. They also did it in, so they were either, when they were activated, dancing, singing, or telling a story from where they're from, actually. So and sometimes it was a protocol which was not visible. They had it written somewhere, but as soon as and then we tried it also in an area where there are a lot of people on a Saturday, like where all the shops, but the activation didn't happen neither. So we really tried to get Genevan. There were only, like all these people you see, that were like kind of us activating the performance. Only like tourists they dared actually to interact with the three performers. So for that, I took it as an example as well. So it was really difficult actually. So I think we really failed actually in programming this performance. I mean, it was interesting for us, of course, to see what happens when you do works like this in public space. But it was also quite a little bit frustrating for the performers, of course, because they were prepared to do like really interact with the people. So the last example I show you, it's an example from an artist from South Africa, Zen Marie. Who came to Geneva, and he spent a month before he did the performance. So he really had time actually to go through the city to see all the sites possible. And he decided actually to work with the UN conventions, which had actually, around the day he had the performance, the 67th anniversary. So he took like this Geneva conventions, and he wrote a speech. He actually performed in front of the UN. So you have the UN building, and then in front of the UN building in Geneva, you have this big square. A lot of protests always happen there. So he actually, as he was there for a month, he could also observe actually how the dynamic of this square is. And he could interact in a very subtle way as well. So he did a speech because in that spot, actually, there is a lot of speeches going on related to international conflicts, of course. So in this square, a lot of things happened. So he stand there and he had his speech, and there were like this crowd, the uninitiated public, of course, listening to him, but there were quite a lot of people also wanted to take photographs with him because they thought he was quite some important figure or a politician, or of course he was also dressed like he could be an official, but of course he was outside of the UN, so he couldn't be an official. But yeah, and so there are always a lot of tourists there, so a lot of layers actually were happening at the same time, like these tourists, people listening to him, and the crowd who was the art crowd from Geneva who knew that the performance going on. Oh, sorry. So yes, I mean, I showed you these 3 examples, so it's always like this site-specific production. So I know that in every city or in every situation, the public space so the production of site-specific performance is different. So I don't know if you, now actually I thought we were 2 when we were, when we were discussing, but So I don't know if I would like to open it, also discuss how you work, or did you have any, how do you say that, experience with site-specific performance, or as a curator, or is it difficult, or is it easy, or do you have questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
So your whole festival it's entirely free and at different sites around the city?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the audience never, is there a program that an audience will come and say, oh, I'm going to that square to see this
Yes.
this time? Okay, so there
So,
is an art audience plus the passers-by.
Yes, exactly. So it was a program of 6 months. So we had it like 1 or 2 performances a month. And most of the performances were announced. There was one artist, local artist, he didn't want the performance announced in the sense of the place. We could actually announce the area, but not where the performer will be. So he works with like these performers who get into you can barely see in the real world, if like to say. So he injects actually his performers into the crowd. But otherwise, yes, there was a program. There were also texts about the performance. And yeah, this I actually like about the site. When you work on in the public space, you have these 2 crowds mixing, and both are in completely different, of course, perspectives, realities as well. We really look at it and we consider it as an artwork. For some, it's like people passing by. If they like can't pass by, they're like, okay, what is happening? So you try to. This is both public, but I'm not so like. I think it's much more interesting for me than for a random public. That's for sure. We're in this bubble. It's art, and so we have all this reflection. For a random public, it's like they see something, but in the best way, they get enchanted or they ask themselves questions. But even though we work in public space, it's mostly for us. It's not. I'm not changing anything in the public space. So. I don't know if I say that. Sorry, I'm kind of. Do you have other questions?
I'm curious if you could say a bit more about the interaction with between the artists and say the everyday performance in these spaces. I don't know Geneva well.
Yes.
Comparing with Forde, where I lived for the last couple of years, so you would have musicians performing in public space, and it's highly regulated. They are on this course,
Yes.
for example, the Wednesday didn't say like they have to like move after every 20 minutes.
Yes.
They have to move by like so many 100 meters. So
Yeah.
kind of a highly controlled system of what is allowed in terms of art in public space. And then with the demonstrations as well, like you're talking here and there are these photographs of demonstrations, I think in the 1980s.
Yes.
Was there any like interaction between having a poster that says no nothing and people having posters saying something?
It's different. For example, this was no nothing. That was really, she wanted to have the authorization, so because it was part of the process. And for the collective Cactus, we needed these authorizations for street musicians actually. So we had to move every 20 minutes. But then we got really lucky because, as I said, for the Genevan police, it's not so fast. So sometimes you could stay like for almost 2 hours on one spot. And then they would come, and then I would say, okay, we're only here for 5 minutes. Let us. So you can negotiate. But we did also, I don't know if I brought it. Sorry. I think it have. For example, for this one, this was also a performance in the same series. It was under a bridge in Geneva, and we didn't ask for anything actually. So she installed her work in the afternoon, and then she did the performance. And This one, as it was really static, a lot of people actually joined the people who were initiated by, or who knew actually the performance was going on. And we organized a really, we organized a really big performance, which was kind of a cortege, kind of a walk through the city with a Genevan artist. Her name is Elena Montesinas, and she did really also an ad in the newspaper saying like people should bring their bills they don't want to pay or they didn't pay, and we burned them all in a big fire. And it was quite a nice. It was a lot of work to organize because there were about 200 people actually walking through the city. So we had police following us behind because this you can't do unannounced. I mean, you could, but yeah, we tried not to mess too much with the city. And also the fire, but we were actually allowed to do a lot of things. So this was possible. We could do this big fire on the main square in Geneva. And with firemen around it also, if ever there would be something, they would protect it. But and also with this one, people joined, especially around this big fire. Like people came and were curious, and they were starting to ask questions, and they were like, "Why do you do that?" And that was quite easier actually to interact. Yeah.
Can I ask, what's your objective behind the festival? And what is your aim?
So when we started to do it, actually, it was a time there was not really a platform for performance art. So this was actually the starting point why we started to do this programming. We did it in different spaces. So that is actually the aim, to give a sort of a platform that also local artists, that we invite international artists and work with national artists, but also local artists doing performance art, because performance art for the visual arts was quite hidden. It's still quite hidden in the visual arts field. It's getting like more and more known, and it's getting more and more visibility, but we wanted to give it like a regular platform. I don't know if that's an answer. So now as a curator, I'm actually love to play in the public space because I'm quite asking myself questions. So it's like not a research in public space, but for me, I can actually go further and can do all this experience, but I don't have like a goal to where to go. I mean, I would like to try out. I would also, the thing is really to give a platform or to invite artists, commission new work so they can really develop works actually in the fields of performance art. But it's not, there is no other. And we don't work with themes neither, because we really choose the works and we want them to create new works actually. So we start every year with zero, so we find all the money also to pay the production, to make it possible actually, because in performance art also you never can sell a work really. I mean, there are some, but that's for us actually quite important that they get salary, they can, so.
And the money comes from the city?
Sorry, yes. Yeah. City, canton, private foundations. So this in Switzerland is quite possible to find fundings, of course. Yeah, it's easy. As easy, I mean, it's work, but it's really possible, yeah. Okay.
And now, is there a platform for performance other than the public space? I mean, like, how did this develop?
Well, the school is actually getting more into performance again. There was in Geneva, and there is not such a regular platform actually. More and more students are doing performance art, but there is not really a regular platform. But there is this.
What would be a regular platform? I mean, like a feed? What is?
Well, if you would have a space, or if you have like once a month you present performance art, or it could be in different spaces. Like exactly. And there is the Swiss Performance Prize now, which is, I'm the coordinator for the Swiss Performance Prize, so this is like national-wide, an open call prize, which happens once a year, and it's quite a big prize. It's, yes, coming from different fields actually, dance, theater or visual arts, and it's getting quite mixed, which is nice because performance for me at the beginning was really actually this interdisciplinary character, which then get again separated. But I think it's in the last 2 or 3 years it's coming more and more together, at least in Switzerland. So there are less barriers actually between the different disciplines actually to performance or short pieces. Yeah. Voilà. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.